Remembering our general approach is to ask the question, if we were to put together our musical system today, having known all the information that we have gleaned over the years, would we put together the same system that we're currently using, a system constructed as we had gleaned the knowledge, building on itself over time? My hypothesis? No, we would not. We would make something way better at this point in time. And I think basically we can make the argument to prove that to a fair jury. And if that is the case, if we can think of a system that would be more simplified, easier to learn, then the question, of course, would be, well, if I learned something in a more clean kind of way, a faster way, would the benefits outweigh the cons, which is, for example, communication and so on, bridging the gap between the two systems. So that's what we want to apply to the concept here of taking our musical alphabet and thinking about a numbering system with it. Now, you can come up with an argument saying that we should just replace the letters with the numbers. That might be the most efficient thing to do if we were to build it from scratch. I'm basically thinking here that we can't really eliminate the letters because, in part, that's the historical way it's been put together. But when you're learning, you probably want to, I would highly recommend, assign some kind of numbering system because, and I'll explain the rationale for that here. Now, I think this is just so painfully obvious that I feel like it shouldn't even have to be said, but sometimes people get upset with these kind of ideas when you try to propose this kind of stuff because I think it goes on tradition. This is the traditional language or something like that. So I feel like we have to basically make the argument that if you're learning music theory from scratch here, you're doing any kind of music, I would say you would want to learn some kind of numbering system along with the letters. Now, this is the one I have put together. You can argue how you should number it, meaning should you make the A 0 and then count up from 0, or should I make the C the 1, or should I make C 0? So there's different numbering systems that you can argue for, which I might get into shortly, but some kind of numbering system I think is just obviously, clearly beneficial and will help you advance better. So general things on how in the world can anyone really argue that that is not the case if you just look at the system the way it is here, right? Because if you were to just say the notes in the alphabet, I can't even sing the alphabet, right? It's like A sharp, B, C, C sharp, D, E. You can't even sing the alphabet going one way, let alone counting it backwards. I mean, try to say the alphabet backwards, even without the sharps and flats, right? And try to sing the alphabet backwards. You have to do that on the fretboard. You have to count upwards and backwards oftentimes when you're trying to figure something out. Now add the sharps and flats in there and try to count upwards and backwards. You're going to have to use your fingers. You're going to have to take your hand off the fretboard and count on your fingers to try to figure out the distance from one note to the other. Not only that, but when I count up, you're supposed to do sharps, and when I count back, you're supposed to do flats. Now, I'm going to get into why this happened, but I just want to just to point out, that's kind of weird, right? I mean, so now when I'm going up, I have to call this an A sharp, even though it's the same note, and then B. But if I was going back the other way, I got to call it a B flat. So now I have two names for the same note. Now, how in the world could that possibly be like an efficient system? And some people, and so there's kind of cool things that come about this, that come from it. And one of the things is kind of interesting, for example, is that when we apply our formula and we make our scale formulas, it's pretty neat that you can say, hey, look, all of the scales that we make, all of the normal scales actually have every note in the alphabet. It's got A through G. They're all spelled out A through G. Isn't that cool? And it's like, well, yeah, that is cool. That sounds like, it looks like a magical thing. But wait, how do you do that? Well, then you just have to go in through there and find how many sharps and flats are in the scale. And then you've got to apply the sharps and flats to the proper notes in the scale. So you're saying, so that means that in order for all the scales to have the letters A through G, all you had to do was give two to at least half of the notes, because sometimes even like these notes, we say it's a sharp or flat, even though there's not even a name for the sharp or flat. So you had to give two names to like at least half of the notes and have them have two names in order to make that happen, right? That doesn't outweigh the pros, do not outweigh the cons, just from like a systems perspective, in my view. And I feel like, just to explain this, like, I feel like this is kind of like if you're sitting on a beach and by a creek and you're looking at the bank on the other side, which is like a rock or something, and you might have ingested like some mushrooms that are doing weird things, and you're looking at the cliff face and you're like, dude, there's patterns in the cliff face. There's patterns, man. The cliff is talking to me. And I'm not even putting that down really, because there are patterns, and the cliff kind of is talking because there is like a formula that the way the water happened on the cliff and the rain made stuff happen on the cliff. So there is patterns there. And if you look at it long enough, you're going to start to find cool formulas and things about it. Similarly here, this isn't the most efficient system, but if you stare at it long enough, if you play with it long enough, you find cool things about it, right? You can kind of make up cool things, the way the sharps, how many sharps and flats are in particular keys, which keys have the sharps and flats in them, how do you spell a particular thing this way and that way. But all of that, I don't think you can possibly argue that those cool things are going to outweigh the complexity that has been added by not numbering and not even having an order of the alphabet of the notes. That's going to be the argument. Now, the only argument I can kind of see that might be rational is you say, well, look, it's a different language, and that language has resulted in beautiful expression, even if we don't really know why, even if it's not logical, it's not the most efficient thing. It's kind of like speaking a different language. Like if you're a French speaker, the French language is just beautiful. Doesn't matter if you can't spell it, right? I'm obviously speaking English. I can't even spell the French words in English. Like I admit restaurant sounds good and garage sounds good, but I can't spell them. I want to call it a car hole and like feed your face place or something like that. It rhymes and stuff. I know that's not as sophisticated and whatnot, but see, so you could make an argument like maybe the language is doing something to create the music, and I get that. So that might be like a valid argument. But the thing that I don't like really is that this complexity creates a barrier to entry. And I'm not sure if there's any intention that has happened on that over time, or if that's just something that kind of drew out over time. But I do know that music is kind of one of those things that used to be an aristocratic kind of thing. Like the peasants couldn't really do music. They're working all the time. They can't really figure out how do you keep something restricted as though it's only for a certain group of people. You make bureaucracy, right? You make it complicated. And so I kind of feel like there might be some of that in our music system, which I really don't like. I don't like that kind of thing, right? You should make it accessible to people by getting rid of the bureaucracy. That's what I tend to kind of think. It's kind of like even in a capitalist system here, like how do the big companies try to hold down competition? You can become somewhat socialistic or communistic, right? You go to the government and say, government, put in all these rules and regulations, which look like they hurt me, but they don't really hurt me because I can jump through the hoops. It just takes out the little guys, right? Similarly here, I kind of feel like, if you made a more simple system, then it might not be as cool because you're not on the in crowd, has to go through the initiation rites of jumping through all the hurdles they jump through the pointless hoops of bureaucracy to be part of the in crowd, seems kind of like there might be some of that here. And I don't really like that. I'd rather say more people be accessible. I mean, it'd be kind of interesting if more people understood music a little bit more. We might have like the normal modern music might be not just a bass beat that people grind against each other to, right? It's just so raw. It's like, you could have a little bit more nuance and it'd still work. You don't need it. It doesn't need to be like, and I get like the explicitness versus non-explicit is just a trend thing this way and that way. But I kind of feel like simplifying it would be better. So I want to do like the thing like that the printing press did for like the Bible, right? You want to make, not by putting it on paper to get it out there, but to make the language easier for more people to understand, faster. I think that's generally the way to go. Anyway, that's my argument. Removes redundancy. So obviously, the traditional note names. Let's just go through this step by step. You've got sharps and flats. That again, you can kind of argue like some things, some different voicings but I don't think there's anything that you can basically say that makes any sense if you were to build the system today to have two names for multiple notes and to have a system that you can't count up and backwards very easily. So with numbers 1 to 12, each pitch gets a unique ID, no inharmonic duplicates. So the way things are taught oftentimes today is like as if there's some kind of magical benefit to these two names for the same note. And I really don't think there is, other than like you can say, well, the scale, again, all the scales have all the same letters, and then you know where the sharps and flats are, and there's a cool kind of symmetry to that just happened to result from having a system that's more complex than it needs to be, but you have this cool result that happens from it and so on.